All right. Hello, hello, gorgeous people of the Thriving Masterclass. I'm so excited to see you all here. And unusual, I do actually have to do a little bit of a disclaimer today. So I have obviously, really started off helping with people with trauma and in therapy world, and have really been evolving. And so I just want to acknowledge that today's conversation is really about thriving and stepping into that next level of success. And kind of the theme is self-responsibility. And I have felt and I have found that at certain points in our journey, this conversation can be triggering. I I know that there's this time in our life where we're like really working through the history of what happened to us and the things that affected us and made us the way we are. And sometimes having this conversation at that point can feel really not good. So if you feel like this might be upsetting or triggering for you, I invite you to leave or come back later. And I want to acknowledge as well that I think there's this line that we pass at a certain point in our journey where I don't want to know that I want to say done healing, but we've done a lot of healing. We start really stepping into our power, and then we start to be ready for different conversations. And what I found is that it's like the surface of the water. It's when you're in the air, it's like you see one thing. When you dunk your head below the water, you see a whole different world. It's like that. And what I've realized is that when we're on one side of the line or the other side of the line, we're not actually great at remembering what was there. So once we get above the water, we forget what it felt like to be under the water. And what I find happens a lot is that people get to this place and they start just looking at people with trauma and being like, you just have to take responsibility. You just have to take accountability. Like, you're the problem, you're a victim. And the empathy goes away. And I've seen this happen, and I've like self-observed myself go through this shift. And so I just want to acknowledge that I think we can have a conversation about moving into more success and be sensitive to trauma, to people who are still struggling. And I really want to normalize that we don't just get to a certain place and start blaming people, because it can really feel like that. So I just want to acknowledge that first. And the inspiration for this masterclass was really that the feeling of success and the things that I'm doing is started to compound, and it's really started to change. And I was having a conversation with a mentor, and I went to say words that I've said so many times before. I was going to say, you changed my life. And I've said that so many times. You changed my life. This changed my life. I can't believe this is happening. And I paused because I felt in my body in that moment, that's not actually the truth. And I was like, what is true? And it was like, I changed my life. I made this happen. I said I was going to do this, and I did it. And there is such a different energy to that and a different feeling to that. And so I'm going to take you back to when all of this really started to unfold. Because so often what happens is I start to see things in myself, and as I become aware of them, it's like I get a new lens and I start to see it in others, and it helps me see and work through things with other people. So as many, like, I've had lots of amazing things happen, and the truth is, in the journey there's been lots of ups and downs. And a couple of months ago, I was invited on this trip to Egypt, and it was going to be the best trip ever. It was the only trip I've never bought travel insurance for, because I was like, it is going to be the best trip ever. I am manifesting only good things. It's going to be so good. And it ended up just being one thing after the other, after the other. It was like personal stuff, emotional stuff. I got really sick. The trip didn't go as planned. I ended up getting stuck in a country. I had to see the doctor. Like, it was a mess. And I could feel that I was taking on this energy of this is happening to me. And it was interesting because I've done all this work. I've dug myself out of a victim mindset. What is going on here? Like, how can this be happening? And as I started to become aware of this in myself, I started to see it in others, because I mostly am in interactions with people now that I would say are mostly healed from trauma. I would say that they're in a place where they're mostly responsible for their life and taking on success. And I see this wobble, this same wobble that I was having in myself. I started to see it in other people. And I was like, what is that? And so I came up with this analogy. If we imagine that when I'm totally disempowered, when I'm the victim, when I feel like everything's happening to me, it's like I'm in the back seat of the car. If I'm driving on the highway of my life, it's like I'm in the back seat of the car. And then when I build up my personal power, when I take responsibility, it's like I'm in the driver's seat. But there's this other energy. There's a frequency in between. I'm calling it passenger seat energy. It's like we get there, we get into the driver's seat, and then somehow we slip into the passenger seat and we become like the co-pilot. And you know what it's like being a co-pilot on a road trip. It's maybe you check the GPS, you're responsible for tunes, you say turn right here. But if something goes wrong and you end up in the wrong place, you're like, I'm not the one driving. I don't know what you want to do. And that's this same energy that I've been watching people slip in and out of. And it's very interesting because we look at this a lot through the lens of the bad things happening. And so if we were to look at really not being in our power and being in a victim stance as the telltale sign being blaming, I think when we're in this passenger seat energy, the telltale sign is complaining. And what we don't realize is that we've got to give credit where we give credit. So if we're going to blame our parents for everything that went wrong when we were young and take credit for everything that went right, that doesn't really work. And the same thing in our life now. If we give the blame for everything that's going wrong to God, angels, Mother Nature, the universe, and we take credit for everything that's going right, that doesn't really work either. And it was interesting because where I actually saw in the nuance with this, it wasn't in the bad things, it was in the good things. And what I found is that it used to be a lot harder for me to stay in those feelings of gratitude that we often talk about for a long period of time when I was having the success. But it changed when I saw this nuance and was able to get myself more into this driver's seat energy, this self-responsibility, this personal power, this I am the one. And I saw that in my celebrations as my celebrations went from, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening and you changed my life, to I changed my life. I said I was going to do this and I did it. And stepping into it. And when the bad things came, I'm the one and I'm going to face this. It changed everything because the good things were no longer happening to me either. I was making them happen. Still as a co-creation with the universe, but making them happen. It was like, I'm creating this. I'm co-creating all the good in my life. And that made me feel this sense of responsibility, this beautiful sense of responsibility, like I'm holding it. If I stop doing this, it can go away, but the beauty is I'm creating it. And what I found is that as I lived like this, it gave me this deep sense of satisfaction as the good things come. And from this place of feeling satisfaction, I was also more easily able to feel gratitude. And as I feel gratitude, it's easier to feel joy. And this trifecta, if you will, of satisfaction, gratitude, and joy became a really powerful piece of this. And what's amazing is that when I'm feeling satisfaction, gratitude, and joy, it's very easy to get excited about what I desire, to get excited about where I'm going. And that really is such an important piece. I think sometimes we get excitement and gratitude confused. Excitement is the thing, it leads you where you're going, and gratitude gives you that appreciation for where you are. And so as I started to create more success from this place of like real self-responsibility and feel this deep sense of satisfaction and gratitude and joy, it's almost like it opened a space to be even more grateful, or sorry, even more excited for what was coming. And what I realized is that every piece of this system matters. If I drop the desire, then the whole excitement thing goes away. And then I'm left sitting in this grateful for what I have and feeling satisfaction and joy. But then I'm not creating anything. So it starts to fizzle. It's like a candle that burns itself out. So every piece of that system matters. I am the one creating and co-creating my life. I feel satisfaction as I create it. I feel gratitude. I feel joy. I have space to feel excitement for what's to come. And this, for me, I've been talking about for a long time. My mentors have been talking about this, holding gratitude for what is and desire for what's to come together. But this was the piece for me that has really ironed it in. This is the piece that's life is good and I'm making more of it. Life is amazing and it gets to be more. And so the key that unlocked all of this, and the thing that I have written on my fridge right now that I keep bringing myself back to, is the phrase, I chose. And so what this looked like when I went to Egypt is I was like, I'm here, and this was unexpected, and I can't believe I got sick, and now this and now that. And it became, I chose to come here. I chose to go on this trip. I chose to put myself in this situation. I chose to spend this money. My choices led me here, and my choices can lead me somewhere else. And bringing that back has been so powerful. And this is a big thing. I can't even remember why the other day, and this slips in so easily. It slips in so easily. This slipped in the other day. I can't remember. And I was feeling sad about something. And it's the second I brought the I chooses in, it changed everything. And in that, you start to realize too, is that what you have today is the manifestation of who you were yesterday. So that's a piece of the responsibility as well. And we get upset sometimes because in the moment, we don't have what we want. And so we feel like we're not getting it. But what we don't realize is what we have now is often a match to who we were. And so in the realizing that we've grown and become a match for, in the not realizing that we've grown and become a match for something new, we get frustrated. And this is where lots of feelings of defeat and frustration and everything kind of creep in. And I think another place that this creeps in is we have a deep desire to connect. And people love to connect over pain. I have been taught my whole life, or sorry, I shouldn't say my whole life, but I was always taught that vulnerability is the foundation of all connection. And I had this interesting experience recently where it was a breakthrough for me, realizing that I wasn't always as vulnerable as I could be with some of my closest people. And so I had this moment where after Egypt, and I was in a lot of distress, and my dog's hitting my microphone. I was in a lot of distress, and I let people see me. I cried and I was really emotional. And then it dawned on me, I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about. This is the foundation of connection. But what was really interesting is that I then felt like something had to be wrong in order to connect. And I watched people do this all the time. Oh, stuff is hard. Oh, yeah, stuff is hard for me too. And I had this thing for a while. I was like, oh, in order to connect, I have to calibrate to something being wrong. But I realized that's actually not my truth. A lot of times I was actually making something be wrong for the sake of connecting. And that's where some of these problems were slipping in. And I have this amazing spiritual teacher friend named Hamaya. And she said this thing to me. She said, in the collective, there's this energy of things are hard. We have a party in the name of pity. And if you are partying with joy, it's like you're partying with the enemy. And I was like, that is so interesting. I've never thought about that, but that is true. And so I start to really think about this. Vulnerability is the foundation of connection. And do you know what I feel? What I've adjusted to for me anyways, is I think authenticity is the foundation of all connection. It's not about something being wrong. It's about something being true. It's not that something has to be wrong. It's that when something is wrong and that we don't share, that's the thing that's blocking truth and authenticity. And this was a huge thing because I realized I can have that openness and that sense of connection without having to calibrate to everyone's problems. And this set me free massively. So I invite you to look at, where are you giving away personal power to match those around you? Because as human beings, there are so many parts of us that want to connect. We have mirror neurons. We literally want to fit in unconsciously all the time. And we know that we live in a society that loves to complain. There's that word again, complain. So it's so easy to calibrate to the complaining around you without realizing that you're giving up the very thing that puts you in the driver's seat of your life. And this other piece of the looking for what's wrong, what I realized, and I've been seeing this more and more, I'm feeling more and more like a coach, but I still do all of my like studying and learning from hypnotherapy world. I always think it's like, who do you want to learn from? Do you want to learn from the people that are like, come back and see me every year for the next 5 years and I'll give you some exercises? Or do you want to learn from the people that can literally whisper in your ear and you have a breakthrough and you're a different person? So all of the magic from that world is so important to me. But as I've been working in different ways and studying from different people, I've seen so many different things. And the way that I'm working now is a lot of getting a client to shift themselves, to have an unconscious shift, and all of their stories fall apart. And it's amazing because they rewrite their own stories. Who inspires me right now? I'm really inspired by Milton Erickson. So literally like old, like OGs. And what I realized is it's like we're floating in space. It's like we're floating in space and something comes along and we grab onto it. And we're like, well, this will be the floor. And then something else comes along and we grab onto it. And this will be the wall. And we grab onto all of these things. So as we're floating in space, we're grabbing onto this problem and this story and this limiting belief and this and that. And now it's like we're in this construct of all our stories. And it's amazing because sometimes when you talk to people, you'll ask the questions and you'll hear the same story over and over again. Have you ever heard that from people? I used to have stories like that. It was like, this happened and then that happened and I can't have this because my parents. We hold on to these stories for so long. But the piece that we don't realize about this is that when we're out there floating in space, we also have access to the sun. It's like all the good stuff, all the light. We don't have to look for it. It's just there. It's like the sun, the light, everything. But what happens is we build this construct that we live in of all of these stories, of all of these pieces, of all of these things that get in the way. And then we try to be grateful and we try to be excited and we try to be satisfied. And we're like, where's the sun? Where's the light? There used to be light, and people are like, there's light everywhere. You can be grateful everywhere. There's good stuff everywhere. And you, from inside this construct that you've built, you're like, where? And people are like, it's everywhere. It's like, literally, you can just look outside and be grateful and there's good stuff everywhere. And you're like, where? I'm living in darkness. And you've got this candle and you just keep trying to light the candle. You're trying to keep the light alive inside. You feel like you have to generate your own light. But what you don't realize is that light is everywhere. It's just blocked by all of the things that you've collected along the way and that you've held on to. And so the journey, a very big part of this is in letting it go. I think so often we think of so many things that we're looking for as something that we have to go outside of ourselves and find. But they're actually the baseline. It's like you don't have to tell kids to be happy. You don't have to tell kids to do so many basic things. My dog, I watch him. He wakes up and the first thing he wants to do is go outside and lie in the sun. It took I don't know how much research, and I listened to the top neurobiologists, Andrew Huberman, talking about, we've done all of this research, and what we have found is that if you get sunlight in the morning, that is good for you. It's like, what? It seems so natural, but we built this world with so many things that get in the way. Why do we need to be told that we need the sun? My dog is the same. He knows if we haven't exercised, if we haven't played, he comes and bugs me and we need to play, we need to exercise. Like, he just knows. And then there's us where I'm very busy. I'm very busy. I need to fit play into my day. Let me schedule 30 minutes for play. Let me schedule 30 minutes for joy. What are we doing? Why is everything such a mess? But I feel like it's such a beautiful time in many ways. And maybe that's me just seeing the light. I see so many people that are waking up. I see technology as a gift. I see so much potential. One of my favorite stories, I worked with this client and she had been doing a lot of work to understand generational trauma. And she said, it takes a long time and it's going to work with me. And then it's going to work with, and then my daughter's going to need all of this work. And then maybe her daughter will be free. And after we worked together, I was like, do you still feel like that? And she was like, no, we're going to break it this generation. And there was this light in her eyes. And I love that. I'm always like, as I talk about this stuff, I'm always like, but what's the how? What's the how? What's the how? I think I always like to look at what stops us. What stops us from stepping in to this, to the I chose. There's resistance. And I've sat there. I don't do this as much anymore, but especially when I used to do hypnotherapy the way that I did in the beginning, I would sit there and try to put people back in the driver's seat of their life and their power. And some people would fight with me tooth and nail. Some people's response, and this was me when I was younger, some people would literally try and shame me. They're like, let me tell you the most shocking, horrible thing that's ever happened in my life to try and dissuade you from this line of thought. It's like, how dare you suggest? And the thing is, I'm not saying that everything that happens to us or everything that we experience is our fault, but it's how we hold it. Is it still going the next day? Did it become the story that's blocking out the light? That becomes ours to hold. And when you can see that, it's so powerful because it becomes easier and easier to come back to that place and to say, I chose this and I'm choosing something else. Sorry, I just looked at the comments. What do I think was the idea or phrase that created the possibility for my client who suddenly believed she could break her intergenerational trauma? It was having her trauma healed to such a deep degree in such a short amount of time. I think it's like most people feel like they're kind of breadcrumbing along. And then it was the realization of, wow, I can actually change. And like, this is amazing. And so I think that's one of the biggest pieces of my message is it's like you can actually change. I had this celebration with a client yesterday. Actually, I wasn't celebrating. I was coaching her and she initiated celebration because she's been with me for almost a year now. And she said to me, because she's in the unlocked membership, and she said to me, I look back at your old videos and I still watch them. And she says, back from the good old days. And but it's not actually the good old days. It's 8 months ago. It's 8 months ago. How is that possible? And I said the same thing. I was like, I look back at them too. Forget about a year ago. I look back at my social media from like December and I'm like, oh, chicken nugget. I feel like I've grown so much in ability and personal power, but that's the beautiful piece of personal development world, coaching, therapy, all the things is that we can actually grow and change. I think we have this timeline where we think that things will take decades and they're actually possible now. And I think one of the biggest things in applying this is, for me, it's been the ability to try things and not make it mean anything. So if I look at a year ago, I launched my first course and there were many parts of it that were good and there were parts of it that were difficult. And the parts of it that were difficult, I had a whole story about it. I was like, this is exhausting. I can't do this every month. Like, this is too much. And I didn't do anything for 3 months. I remember I used to have sessions with clients that were difficult and I would go, oh, I'm a bad therapist. I'm never going to be successful. I'm this and I'm that. And then I had to dig myself out of this pity pit, out of this construct that's blocking the light. Whereas now I've become the person, and as I've been, playing and trying and doing new methods and different things, sometimes I have a session that's not that great. And my only thought is I need more practice. And I can't wait. I can't wait to dive in. And there's things in my business too. I have people in my masterminds that sometimes like, I went to launch this thing and no one bought and I'm devastated. And it's, so what? Do the next thing. Do the next thing. Do the next thing. when we don't make it mean and collect these stories, it becomes so powerful. It's like you decide no matter what. That's the thing. That's the energy I think that I've tapped into at different points in my life that has always been the peace, whether something happens or it doesn't. And I actually realized this the other night too. I'm sharing a lot of personal stories today, but I was I have been talking a lot about one of the biggest desires that I have right now is for a partner. And I was I was on Tinder, as you are, and I was messaging people and I was trying to make plans. And I messaged a couple of people, and then I went to message one person and I hesitated to make plans. And I suddenly realized, I was like, you literally just messaged everyone that you knew would reject you. And the one person who actually seems like they might be a good partner and might actually be available for like this thing that you're asking for, you're hesitating. And what I realized is that I play differently when I expect to be rejected than when I actually expect to have success. And then I was like, this is wild. This is self-sabotage in action. Let's think about that. And I immediately took that lens and applied it to my business. And I suddenly could see it was like red and green through these different seasons. I play differently in my business when I expect to succeed and when I expect to fail. I say the things, I say the affirmations, I have the vision board, I have the recording. But if I'm really honest with myself deep down, there's a way that I do it when I don't think that it's going to work. And there's a way that I do it when I know that it's going to work. And they're so subtle. And I see this in people and clients too. It's let me do this launch. Okay, I'm going to do this launch. I'm launching. I put it out. Okay, it's not working. Okay, you gotta keep it. Okay, let me go keep doing it. Let me go keep going. It's still not working. Like we do the action so that we can tell the story that we tried, but we're not actually trying like we're going to make it happen. And the thing is, it's not about the actions. And this is something that I'm really working on demystifying too. It's so much deeper than that. Because the truth is, it actually doesn't matter what you do. It's the energy behind it. If I'm making this a success, no matter what, that changes what you do. And I was reflecting on this yesterday too, because some of my clients that I've had for a long time still use tools that I taught in the beginning. And I realized that I didn't have this deeper understanding of feminine energy, of energetics back then. And it really changes everything. On the surface, I used to just teach people to say different words. And then I would watch people who I was trying to teach to be more self-aware and not be manipulative go and be extra manipulative using the words that I had taught them. And what I realized is the energy underneath it is what matters. It doesn't matter if you have the words, if you have these words of conflict resolution, if you use them in a manipulative way, then you're just more manipulative. And so I couldn't understand what was happening a year ago because I was like, how are you not getting this? How did you just take my beautiful teachings and twist them into this grotesque thing? What has happened here? I'm so shook by this. But it was a beautiful thing in that moment too, because I realized I was like, oh, I have the understanding of what's actually going on. My mentor Melanie will often say, it doesn't matter as much what you do as who you are when you do it. And that's the essence of it. I had someone say to me the other day when we were catching up, she had this amazing story she was telling me about it. And she said, I'm so happy you received it the way you did. And you said this and you said that and you said this and everybody else says this other stuff. And I so much more enjoyed telling the story to you. And then I had this thought and I was like, oh, it's a good thing I jumped through all those hoops and said those right words. I was literally in the shower and I was like, what would happen if I didn't say those words? Do I need to remember to say those words again? But then I realized that's the construct. That's the thing that we've picked up and made mean something. Because the truth that I believe is it actually had nothing to do with what I said. It was the energy that I was in. It was the energy of being invested in her story, receiving, being excited for her, seeing her as the hero, because she'd basically gone against doctor's advice to heal herself from, I think it was diabetes or something. We all love those stories, don't we? And I realized it was like, oh, we grab onto that because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught it's the words that you said that mattered. We've been taught that it's the surface level thing when it's not. I could have said anything. because I was in the energy of support and receiving. And so any words that I said would have been the words that made her feel received, because that's the truth. That's the authenticity. That's the truth of the connection. But we make it mean it was the words. It isn't. It's who we are. And when who we are becomes the person that's in the driver's seat of our life and says, I chose this, no matter how hard it is, no matter how painful it is in that moment. And this is the cultivation of courage is such an important piece, because it's often in order, like there's always a payoff. It's not like, I just choose to be responsible for everything in my life. Life is easy, sunshine, rainbows, light. It's like, I choose to be responsible in my life, and now I have to go face the darkest shit that I've been avoiding forever. It's in doing the shadow work. That's what it is. It's not the fun stuff. It's not the easy part of healing. It's like that one thing or those three things that you didn't want to mention when you went to therapy, that you didn't mention in your first session, that you didn't put on your intake form, that when the person says, is there anything else? You're like, no, but really there is in the back of your mind. It's that thing, that deep thing that you know at your soul level that you've been avoiding. That's the piece that puts you in your power and changes everything. That's the piece when you step into it and say, I chose. Into saying I chose and I'm going to be responsible, I have to also deal with this thing. And that takes courage. It takes self-awareness. It takes being ready, which is why this conversation is for a certain point in our journey, because at another point in our journey, it feels like shame and gaslighting. And I know, as there are a lot of coaches and therapists here, I want you to take your attention to that, because I think that we miss this. I just think that there's these two worlds. One is so trauma sensitive, and then one is beyond trauma. And it's like, you just need to be responsible, and which is not the thing when you're there. But then also, I think when we're really in this world of helping people in their pain, we also miss a piece of the last part of setting ourselves free, is to not look for it anymore. And there's a real art in understanding, when is there still something here, and when are we through this and we're only creating it because we've built the cycle of looking for it. The last piece in letting go of all the old stories is that we no longer look for them. And again, this is where nuance comes in. This is where the depth comes in. There's a difference between, I'm just going to ignore that. People come to us and they haven't been looking for it, right? I'm just going to ignore that. I'm just not going to deal with that anymore. Okay, what happens when you plug into that and you're nervous? Oh, I cry and all this emotion. Okay, there's still stuff there. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with this. There's unresolved stuff, but there comes a time when the charge is gone, the impact is gone. We're clear, but we've spent so much time working on it that we keep looking to our past. And there comes a time when we've got to look to the future, when we're the creator. That's what it means when all of these teachers that have come before have said, you are the creator of your own reality. I think it's more like you clear everything out of the way that blocks you, and then you become the creator of your own reality. And in the vein of this too, something I've become aware of is that, like, we have a blurry lens when our stuff isn't cleared. Like when we're emotionally charged and we're looking at stuff, what we're looking at is ourselves. I think we all understand the concept of that. But what I've really realized too is that when you heal through things, that's when you can see clearly. So it's like, I was triggered in one of the communities that I'm in when I first came in about just some of the way things are done around success and money. But I had enough awareness to recognize that I'm being triggered. And so it's like, okay, I've got to work through this. I've got to work through this. I've got to deal with the shadow. I've got to deal with my own stuff. I've got to heal. And then it was like, comes to this point, I'm like, oh, I can see clearly now. But now that I can see clearly, I can discern, and I can actually see that I don't love that. And I'm going to choose not to operate like that. But I do like that. And I'm going to be inspired by that. But it's like, I can't navigate my life with clarity as long as it's a trigger, because the emotional charge blinds me. And all I see is myself. All I see is myself. The things that upset me are the things that I see in myself, but they're like projected outwards and then amplified. And so I think this is like part of the inner work. It's like, you can't say words that make sense to that, but it's like when you train yourself to be aware of your inner state, you start to become aware of, I can feel that I'm charged about this and I feel triggered. And so I know that I'm seeing things differently versus I'm clear and I can trust my discernment because it's clear and I'm looking through a clear lens. So I would love to, what Vanessa said, look at the past event and not think about it, observe and be truly fascinated. Yeah. And that's the thing that happens with clarity. I think people often say that it's about forgiveness. And I think there's a season of forgiveness and then there's a season of letting go. There's a season of letting go because the charge isn't there and it no longer feels like I have to forgive. Because the forgiveness only is charged if I'm still holding on to the pain or the story or what was created. But beyond that is this place of I experienced that and now I'm the creator of my reality. And so I'm free. And I think it takes a lot to get there. And I think it's confusing because one of the reasons I've been talking so much about the journey lately is because I think where we are on the journey matters what's happening. So I'd love if there are any questions at this point or anything you want to deepen or discuss. And then I'm going to chat about some of the cool things that are happening this month. Just give a second for, oh, if you want to just put it in the chat and then I can respond. Create your own reality. Love that. If one knows this to be true, it's so powerful. And it's interesting too, though, isn't it? Because I think we hear so much. It's so easy to listen to law of attraction. It's so easy to listen to all the great spiritual teachers and people talk about being a master manifester. They talk about, I am the creator of my own reality. And we're like, oh, I'm the creator of my own reality. But what does that actually mean? What is the depth behind that teaching? What does it mean? And then you start to get it and you're like, oh, I'm actually the creator. I have to tell you guys, I had the wildest thing last night. So I went up to, I have this little like gazebo thing where I can see this view. And I was going to update my vision board because I was like, I've been sitting so much in satisfaction and gratitude and joy that I actually haven't been like creating the future. And so I went up to plan. And one of the things I was going to do was update my vision board. And so I opened like the Pinterest, which is where I tag things to put on my vision board. And you guys have probably seen that I've been in Miami. The exact hotel that I stayed in Miami was on my vision board. And I had not realized it. The exact hotel. Like I looked at my vision board and I was like, I was at that pool. I went up I was mind freaking blown. I was like, I can just have anything, man. Let's freaking go. And then I didn't end up doing any planning because I'm so happy with satisfaction and gratitude. Aria says, my biggest awareness with clients is when their habitual limiting responses are rooted in trauma. So important to be compassionate and activate their power in moving out of the trauma response to possibility. Yes. Yes. I love that. And this is why I set up the context for this conversation, is because there's a time when if someone had told me this, I would have been like, F you. And that's the thing. It's like, we have to be able to deal with that. And then we have to be able to move beyond it. And I want to be conscious and aware of who we're speaking to, of where they are, of what's going on, and not just say when someone's in the worst place of their life, like it really is the self-responsibility that saves them. But the feeling of hearing that feels like the biggest FU. But on the flip side of that, I think a lot of people go through a lot of healing and then maybe life isn't exactly what they want and they think that they need more healing, but actually it's now you need something else. I had a client that came back and she's like, I think I need more therapy. I was like, I think you need coaching. Nothing's wrong. You just don't know how to step into the next level of what's right. And so we did it. And she was like, this is exactly what I needed. So anyways, with that being said, I think it's an amazing time to practice that feeling of satisfaction, of gratitude, of joy, and to get rid of everything that gets in the way.